Welcome to the Strength Coach Collective, a podcast brought to you by Two Brain Business. We are here to help advance the strength and conditioning coaching community by bringing you a wide range of experts in the field. You can join our group at strengthcoachcollective.com. For today's episode, I'm your host, Kenny Marquardt, and I'm here with Nathan Holliday, the founder and owner of The Level Method. I'm super excited for this conversation. Nathan and I have known each other for a handful of years, but he's just a total nerd when it comes to energy systems, and I really love and appreciate that about him. And he's got a great framework within the Level Method, but energy system blueprint course that's in there that I've been through, and it was one of the most extensive courses that I've been through, and I've been through a lot. So I thought he'd be a great person to have on to bring some context and knowledge to our group about energy systems.
Great to be here, man. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's start with, like, you guys have a convenient framework around energy systems with the house analogy. Do you want to start there and then we can let it ride?
Sure. So energy systems in general is a kind of complicated topic. There's like all sorts of ways to approach it, and like I was always looking for a cohesive model, and I'm a big fan of analogies. So like in the early days when I'm trying to think about how to teach this and to learn it myself, I came up with the house analogy, which is what powers a house, and it's VPE, ventilation, plumbing, and electricity. And so it's an analogy for the three basic energy systems that we all kind of know, that we've all learned in different ways: short, medium, long. But there's a little bit more of a nuanced interaction between these energy systems, with plumbing kind of sitting in the middle. So it would be helpful to see a diagram, obviously, but if you just imagine in your mind, on the left hand, you have electricity, which is like power, like electrical stuff, all the powering of electricity in your house. Then you have all the plumbing, which is, the toilet and all of the piping and everything that's going to be supporting that. And then you have ventilation, which is the windows, the air conditioning, everything that has to do with air and breathing, essentially. Now the electricity and the ventilation are on opposite ends of each other, and you have plumbing in the center, which is kind of the intermediary. So you kind of travel through to get to ventilation. You kind of travel from electricity to plumbing to ventilation, but sometimes very quickly. It's like in a moment. But essentially, that is the framework that just helps teach and learn these fundamental concepts that are universal across every way that you'll ever learn energy systems. We just use this model to make it simpler. That's basically it.
Yeah. And so electricity being like CP or creatine phosphate,
right.
Plumbing being glycolytic, and ventilation being the oxidative.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things I really appreciate about your perspective in the course is it really brings, like, mixed modal conditioning is a complicated thing to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy when it's a single modality or a single time domain or a single movement. Like, I think it's not crazily complicated, but when you start blending those things together, I think it can get really deep. And I think one of the things that I like about what you've been able to provide is some guidelines, frameworks, and things to think about when doing that. Because if you look at like a traditional textbook or an external resource, like, it just doesn't really bring that stuff together as well as I think you guys do.
Yeah, that is exactly like the cohesive model concept. So if you study energy systems, there's always like work capacity systems and contraction based systems. These are kind of how they're separated in the world. So you have like all of the aerobic system and all of that, and then you have like bodybuilding and stamina, contraction-based, muscularly dominant systems separated. And so when you learn about energy systems, it's like they're generally housed in these two different worlds. And how can they be integrated? Because that's really what CrossFit is. It's this kind of hybrid. You have a lot of different moving parts and things are blending and kind of going through in different ways. And so how does a single model take into account all those variables? And the VPE, when you look at the big worlds, like, again, without being able to show you because if you've gone through the course, you'll see that, like, every system has subsystems, but they're all comprised of the same three elements. So if you go to electricity, right, you have, now, again, like, without going through the course, it's kind of difficult. It might not make a lot of sense, but like electricity and plumbing together, you can have two letters, E and EP. Electricity, so it's like electricity, like super electricity, which would be like neurological. And if you went one level deeper, it would be three E's, which is like very, very sharp neurological control. But if you go like electrical plumbing, E with a sub P, then you get into like CP endurance and these other sorts of worlds that, if you've studied energy systems, you'll be familiar with CP endurance, words like aerobic power, lactic endurance, or lactic tolerance. These words, like, you'll be familiar in like how to gain access to these, but how are they cohesive? Like, how do I morph one of them into the other, right? And again, without diagrams, that's what the whole course is like. It's multiple hours, and there's a lot of diagrams in there so that you can get a world picture. So you can imagine in your head how energy systems relate to each other, like what you have to do to move and morph into these different systems. And when you look at mixed modal stuff, like using what we call VP, ventilation as the primary and plumbing as the secondary, we call that aerobic power. And the P doesn't have anything to do with aerobic power. It has to do with primarily aerobic. And then within the aerobic world, you have plumbing. And this is very classic CrossFit, where it's like, within the aerobic world of my breathing, I've got a lot of muscular contractions. Now, depending on like how much muscular contraction, you always have to ask, like, what's the limiting factor in any workout? So again, like, the limiting factors is a very crucial point to anything you do with energy systems. So when you do a workout, and you ask yourself, what was the limiting factor of that workout? What was the sensation of that workout? That will tell you essentially what system it was. So if I go and I do a workout and I'm like muscularly so fatigued that I can't continue because of a muscular limiter, then chances are I'm going to be in the plumbing, the stamina zone, right? If I literally can't produce enough force to move the weight anymore, then I'm going to be in an electricity dominated area. Or if like I lose neurological coordination, like a brain development thing, the limiting factor would be, again, electricity. If I'm going so hard and I can't breathe anymore, and I'm like fully winded and I can't catch my breath and I just can't move anymore, then obviously it'd be ventilation. These are the limiting factors. So when you think about any mixed modality, you look at CrossFit and all the insane variations that you can do, you ask yourself, well, what was the limiting factor? And you'll have the energy system for you, because it's going to be to like calibrated to you. One workout can be run and have different sensations to different people depending on their adaptation. So like, what kind of athlete are they? What is their history? Do they have a history of aerobic stuff? So that's not the limiting factor for them. And when you look at that, then you can kind of determine what that system is. And when you try to globally you have a workout and you try to globally put an energy system label on it, I mean, yes, it should be aerobic power. Like, that's ideally what it should be. But someone who doesn't know how to pace or run themselves might make it something completely different. You see this like in the classic Fran or like a Cindy, these classic CrossFit workouts that people will know. You have the very obvious example, like way back in the day you had Spiel doing like 40 rounds of Cindy or whatever. That's not a stamina workout, even though it's all body weight and it's muscularly dominant. If you have someone that barely gets 10 rounds, that's like pure on stamina, like failing on the pull-ups or failing on the push-ups and can't continue. It's the same workout, but completely different systems involved. And then same thing with Fran. If Fran takes you 10 minutes, this is not lactic endurance, lactic tolerance. This is a completely different workout, right? And so by understanding energy systems, you kind of have this hidden language to be able to decipher what like what is the workout and what am I trying to do? And that's why scaling becomes so important. And
Yep.
like it, as a coach, if you're looking to scale someone, the first thing you have to ask is like, well, what's the intent? Like, what am I trying to do with this workout? What's the outcome? And I would scale based on the desired outcome. And so understanding energy systems then allows you to scale based on outcome, essentially being the system that you're trying to hit on.
Yeah, totally. Because with slight modifications, you can change a workout completely, right? Like,
Totally.
for example, a Cindy. If you were to change the workout to be 2, 4, and 6 instead of 3, 5, or sorry 5, 10, 15. For people not familiar with the workout, we're talking about 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 air squats. Like that's going to be more of a stamina thing for most people. But if you dropped it way down to something that's very doable, which for a lot of people, the 5, 10, 15 is very doable. So it becomes more aerobic. But if you drop it way down, it becomes more universally aerobic, right?
Right. Exactly.
And then if you increase the reps, it becomes more stamina based, more plumbing based. But again, I think the takeaway, the biggest advantage I've found for that is understanding the workout's intent as a program designer for the people executing the programs. Like my coaches now understand this is what the limiter should be, so they can convey it to the members if we're doing a group class, they can convey that to the members of like, hey, this is how you should be modifying this workout to get this intent. And then as a programmer for individuals, to understand this is the intent that I need for my person. So this is what I need to modify in order to not just look at, I think it's really easy to just look at time domains and say, oh, well, this is 3 minutes. Like this is what this is going to be, or this is 30 minutes. Like this is an aerobic workout, when it's not necessarily the case. So I think it just becomes way more, again, like I said at the beginning, it's such a nuanced art to design programs around a mixed modal environment without a further understanding of these systems. I think it's just too complicated for to do.
I mean, it's like I've become personally obsessed with like creating a framework that can help decipher it. Now, there are many ways to do it without a framework, so you'll see like, okay, pick a weight that you could do 30 reps with.
Sure.
Pick a weight that you could do X, Y, Z. And this is the shortcut for like, I have in my mind kind of what I want to do. And so then I'm going to tell somebody to do this and just kind of pick a weight that they can do. Now, my obsession has always been like, I want to understand, I want to be able to go end to end and be able to decipher and break everything down into its constituent parts. So the VPE, the model that we use, it does that. In the course, we talk about how it's fractal. So you have the big picture, but the VPEs, they drop down into subcategories, and then you get another layer of subcategories. So you have 17 total systems that we have. And these are kind of isolated systems that are like isolated in a archetypal way. So it's like, here's an archetype of the workout, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to be like that in practice. It just gives us a framework to be able to see like, okay, in the perfect world, in the perfect example here, this is the workout and this is how it should feel. But then you layer in athletic ability, your history, how well you are, how good you can pace a workout, those sorts of variables, and it completely changes things. And that's why it's so complicated. It's like, how do I'm going to try to create a workout and I have an intent in my mind, and then you see it on the floor and you're like, whoa, this is like not at all what I thought it was going to be. This is like totally different, or there's like such a wide range. And this is why, like what we do with Level Method with the levels is they're calibrated, scaled levels. Yep. So that the calibration of the scaled level, essentially, if you do it and you're a certain level and then you do this level, the energy system should be calibrated to that level. So the access point to get the appropriate energy system for the RX workout is whatever. And the energy system for the RX, the quote unquote RX workout, is this. And this is the time domain. And this is kind of what I'm trying to get. with level method, you go to the scaled version. So now I'm going to do a blue level, and all things in a perfect environment, the blue workout should elicit that same system for that blue person. But then it gets, with levels considerations, you know how levels considerations work, it gets a little bit more dynamic, and you can change some things to get a more focused workout. Because again, everything we do has to it's all about systems. It's all about energy systems. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you also have the layer of skill work.
Yep.
So if it's not energy systems, then it's skill focused. But for the most part, we run things by systems.
Yeah, and I think that as you've become obsessed with the energy system stuff, I've become obsessed with trying to make everything as individualized as humanly possible. Like I think that even in a group of 14 people, like the job of a good coach, or if a coach is doing a good job, they should individualize that workout for that person. And even within the levels, like there's still so much individualization, even with the levels considerations too, because that's another hyper consolidation of the individual nature. Like there's still more things like neuromuscular endurance and skill sets, and there's just a lot that can go into tailoring a workout for the individual, which again, my obsessions become that. And I think that what this allows you to do is understand so many of the variables that I don't think a lot of people have even considered. Like I think most people look at, again, time domains, injuries, and skill stuff, which is, it's okay, but there's so many more layers to that.
Yeah, that is a huge, like a good coach, a great coach. I mean, if you look at the development of a coach, like scaling is difficult because it's not just scale. Like there's so many questions, and there's like, how is the person feeling? What injuries do they have? What did they do before? Or have they been doing 6 days in a row? Have they not been here for a couple of weeks? Like, what are all the variables? And that's why, like when you work with levels, it's just an accelerator in the moment. Like it gets you to a more accurate starting point faster, so then you can do your job as a coach even better, more detailed, more structured, as opposed to like, well, first I got to figure out kind of like what the weights are going to be, what movements I should change it to, and then I have another layer of like figuring out what you did, or do you have any injuries? But so it's like you can just skip all that first part and then get right to the really focused detail of what's going to be maximized for this person. How are they going to get the best workout possible?
Yes, for sure. And I think one of the things that I had to explain more thoroughly to people as we implemented the level method was, this is not your color forever. Like this, not only are you going to progress, but I mean, this is not because you tested in a blue level, even again, with the levels consideration in the workout, like that doesn't, like on a daily basis, that can totally shift. Like, and on a workout basis, especially, that can totally shift. And so again, I think the hyper individualization thing is just so much more enhanced through an understanding of energy systems and what you've been able to provide.
It's very dynamic, changes somebody's workout. That's like, if someone's working out at home, like unless they're an expert, unless they've been doing it for so long, like the vast majority of individuals, like, I mean, everybody basically, and then even within the coaching cohort of coaches, like you've been coaching for a year or 2 years or 3 years, it's like you're still early on in just the necessary amount of time that you're going to need to be, like, you have to see things, you have to have enough input over a long period of time. And like, again, there's a spectrum of coaches. So some people might accelerate in their coaching ability faster than others, but it's still like, it's like learning a language. There might be some outliers that can learn the language in like a year, or like faster, or get by with some tricks pretty quick. But to master the language is going to take, there's like, to be fluent is going to take some time. There's really no accelerating it. You can use techniques and strategies and stuff. But what we want to do is we want to understand that it takes time to get to the point where you can do all of the things that are necessary as a coach. By understanding energy systems and understanding levels and calibration, you drastically accelerate, like, to get to the point where now, like, at least like 80% of the most important stuff is taken care of. You're not going to injure people. You're not going to mess them up. I mean, if you don't command and control the class as well as you could, okay, that's like one element of coaching. But if you tell someone to do a completely wrong movement or a completely wrong weight, like there's a short, like you can hurt somebody like immediately right now, so it's like the risk factor is quite high. And that's why getting all of these fundamentals in place, learning energy systems, understanding scaling properly, it gives you the foundation you need to be a great coach, right? That's like, it's so important.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it's there's a name for this. Maybe you can help me with that. But like the chasm of like where you think you know a lot and then you start to learn more and you realize you don't know anything at all. And it's just like that continued journey of, I've been doing this for 15 years or whatever. And I keep learning more and more and more and realizing how little I actually know.
Well, you get a ton of fun. It's funny because there's so many like worlds, right? Like,
yes,
there's a infinite number of specialty worlds. It's like go online and go to any forum of any individual. So I just bought this truck and like there was something wrong with it. So I like go onto a forum and I'm like, oh my God, there are these people in here that have been there for 20 years and they know every possible detail of everything. You can ask them any question. And it's just like, there's just hyper sectionalized, focused of like these different rooms. But you do that in anything, in any profession or whatever. And so like you get exposed to a new idea and you're like, damn, I don't know anything. And this is like, if you don't have that feeling, then it just means that like you're not there yet. Like you think, if you think you know a lot, like everything, then it's like, that's an indicator that that's what you think when you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. That's totally. Like, so it's just hilarious. Cause I mean, the same thing happens to me all the time. I'm like, wow, there's a whole world that I never even knew existed.
Yeah. Walk into the right room and realize you're the new dumbest person in there and try and learn from everybody. It's the best. I think if you can have the right mindset, it's really fun.
And that's like, frameworks. If you know Charlie Munger, he talks about, he died, but everybody knows who Charlie Munger is. He's Warren Buffett's partner. He's like a super genius guy. And he always talks about a lattice work, a framework of models. So, and what you're trying to do is you want to connect these different models in your mind and find the similarities between different worlds. And when you understand that pretty much everything is models, and if you can find the best models in these different worlds and then you can connect them, your learning is drastically increased. It's accelerated. Because you're not trying to go from the base and like work your way up and try to understand like, well, what's good and what's not good. And like, I don't even have the discernment ability to know if this is good or bad because I just started. And this is what happens, someone gets into fitness or whatever the thing is, and they're isolated into this one world and they think that this world is the answer. But the thing is, there are many different worlds. And until you learn all these different worlds, you can't figure out if the thing that you're learning is good or not good. Because once you do figure like, okay, well, now I can discern what is the best stuff and what is not the best stuff. Then I can make a decision based off of that. And that just takes a long time. And that's a huge element to the development of a coach. I mean, everybody knows and has gone through this is the one right answer phase where it's like, this is it. This is what I've been missing. And this is the only way to do this thing. You see this a lot in CrossFit. I mean, because that's how any world is, especially when all of the elements of like in CrossFit, everything that you learn is so elegant and it makes so much sense. And it's like intensity and like all these factors just makes so much sense. And you can't see how anything else could possibly work when you have this thing that's so badass. But then you go through enough years and you see, well, there's actually a lot of ways to get to the end result. And understanding what the end result is, like, what are you trying to do for your clients? Who is your client? What have they been like? What stressors do they have in their life? And as we were just talking before we started, where like I just had a baby, and when I was growing up as a young coach, I had no concept of what that meant. And like it takes time, and then you learn, and you're like, wow, my perspective has totally changed now. And what that person might need in class could be totally different than what is programmed on the in the workout. They might need some sort of adjustment that is completely outside of energy systems.
Yeah.
That's the whole other part of coaching, is understanding the relationship and figuring out, like, having a conversation with somebody, seeing what their language is like, how are they feeling, and then having the power in your own confidence to just totally change everything that person's doing if it's appropriate for them, and that's like, again, it just takes a lot of years. There's no way around the years that it takes.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's like a craftsman kind of analogy, like where when you have a hammer and you've just learned how to use a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And like CrossFit for a lot of people is like, man, this is a solution for everything. And then as you develop as a craftsperson, your tool shed becomes so much more expansive, and you start to recognize, like, I don't know that there are any really bad tools. They're just bad applications to some of those
Perfect.
tools. And I think, again, learning how to do all these things in a broad way, or yeah, in the broad way, but then using them specifically is, I think it makes it so much more fun by exposing yourself to these other things and giving yourself some different
Perfect
perspectives.
example, perfect analogy.
What to pivot just a little bit, like a lot of the intent of for our coaches and listeners is to help health span and lifespan for people. How do you how can you apply, again, it's a broad thing. We just talked about hyper individualization, but on a broader scope, using these concepts of energy systems, like how can coaches use these better, or how can they apply these in a better way? Is that a clearly
Yeah,
worded
I mean,
question? Yeah.
like, again, with any client, the first step is always some form of assessment. Assessment can come in various forms. It can literally be a conversation, but what you're trying to do is figure out where somebody is and where they need to go or want to go. So I think that, like, if I have a conversation with somebody, and I mean, we do level method and we do fitness, and we're like, this is how you get better. But maybe somebody doesn't want to deadlift 400 pounds or something. Maybe that's not part of what they're looking to do. They want to, as an example, look good or feel good. Now, the look good, feel good world, or the longevity world, you're going to be sitting more in certain systems than other systems, energy systems, just out of necessity. So if I look at longevity, I mean, I want to do doses. Ideally, even if somebody wants to live, 100 years, I still want to dose them every once in a while with something difficult, like
Mm,
something that's pretty uncomfortable. Just because I think that that's a necessary part of life, and you don't want to get
totally.
into a situation where you've never done that. So I might have doses, but like when you look at the percentage layout of somebody's program, it might be mostly aerobic, right? So we're living in that aerobic zone, and then we have maybe like 30% or something in muscularly dominated contraction based work. And then you have some neurological stuff that's like balance, a little agility, stuff like that. But by understanding the different systems, you can create templates in your mind of how a program should be outlaid from an energy system standpoint. Energy systems lay the foundation of any good program. Like, where am I living? What kind of programs am I doing? And if you look at any of these different worlds of fitness and you analyze the programs, you can break, if you understand energy systems, you can break them down into templates of energy systems, right? So it's like, you look at the bodybuilding world, what's their template? It's like pretty much all contraction based work with low intensity cardio, long slow distance stuff. And that is pretty much universally, if you go across the board, you're going to see that combination in some form. And so what I would say, that anybody who's looking at their clients and wants to create a program, or like, how does energy system work in creating the best program, it's first understanding like, well, what does the client want and need? And then like, what do they have? There are variables that come into place. Like, what equipment do they have? How much time do they have available? Like, these are extremely important variables. Like, if I'm like, here's a workout that requires hanging rings and like, whatever else, and I also don't know how to power clean, and I only have 10 minutes a day. It's like, wow, okay, well, now it completely changes, right? And if I give them the program that is inappropriate, they're just not going to do it.
Yep.
That's it. It's like, it doesn't matter. It can be the best program in the world, but if it's inappropriate, they're just not going to do it. So like, there's the balance of giving them the appropriate workout and really ramping up the relationship factor so that they trust you and they like don't want to disappoint you. They like really want to do a good job. So that takes time. Like, you've got to build that relationship with the person. So it's multifaceted. Energy systems is a foundation of knowing like, okay, where are we going to be living in the kind of training that we're doing? All the variables that come into play in terms of program design, when it's like, well, what do you have available to you? How much time? And then that relationship factor. And I would say the relationship factor might even be the most important one, because you can give them a great program. It can be perfectly, but if they don't respect you, they don't like think, and a lot of people will charge a lot of money to offset that. So it's hard to get someone to trust you and right off the bat. But if you charge them a lot of money, suddenly they're more motivated, right? So like, that's why the argument to always charge more is that's one of the key factors, because compliance is increased. But that relationship and compliance, that like, if you have no compliance, you have no result.
Totally.
Right. So that is, if you step all the way back, compliance is the number one, but the energy systems and understanding energy systems will help you build a program based on what they want and need, and then push them towards the goal of whatever that looks like. Like, and it'll be unique. I mean, most of them are pretty much the same. Like, pretty much everybody, there's like 3 or 4 outcomes that somebody wants, and then it's just refining it and making it better over time and building that relationship to help them achieve what they're paying you for.
Yeah, totally. You touched on a lot of great, like, AI has gotten so much traction, or not traction, but attention in the last really 18 months or so. But, the contention is always like, well, the relationship factor is going to be something I think we'll be able to hold on to for quite some time. Like, you can use the tool, but to be able to retain that relationship with somebody and have the authority and respect and rapport, candor with them, like, I think that's going to keep us in business for a long time.
Compliance.
Yeah, totally.
Are you like, oh, please, AI, I didn't do my workout. And the AI is like, why the hell are you not doing it? It's like, you don't even care. Who cares? But
right,
like,
the human experience. Like, I remember when I had that struggle, here's how I got through it. Like, I don't think that's going to be a thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like I mean, that's a great point, because the AI, it can accelerate so many things. It can help you as a coach in a lot of different ways. Like, as a coach, you should be using AI, using ChatGPT, using it in a lot of different ways, consulting ChatGPT. I mean, it's an incredible resource. But we've always had incredible resources at our disposal from a client standpoint. So how long have libraries been around? Yep. And libraries are full of books, and the books contain, there are books that are all about how to get in shape and how to get fit, and all the information is there. AI makes it easier to get access, so you can go on and be like, give me a summary of this book. Okay, now I get all the summary of this book, but what's missing is the action. Yep. The action is like, the AI can't do it for you. You still have to do it. So while AI is a great tool, it's like, it's not really, it's going to help some people, but it's like, still, there's a big gap there for sure.
Yeah. It's the other saying, I'm going to forget the author of, but it's, if information were something, we'd all be billionaires with 6-pack abs. Like, it's just, it's not the only thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We started on the path of how to use these things, and it began with an assessment, which I totally agree. What's the progression like? I think a lot of coaches don't have a good comprehension of progressing most energy systems outside of electricity. Like I think strength works relatively easy to progress, like, you know, add reps or load or decrease rep. Like that's relatively on the easier side. What does it look like from a program design perspective on progressing these things? And I mean, even the aerobics probably on the easier side to progress as well. But I think the ventilation can be harder.
Yeah, I mean, like you have variables always with any sort of progression, that controllable variables, right? And it's like rest times, work times. Generally, rest times, work times are the fundamental variables. So how much are you working relative to the rest? And then shrinking that again based on the goals, right? So if someone's training for a specific thing, that specific thing will tell me how I need to progress it, right? So like if I'm looking to do a 1 minute like max air bike and I want to like that's what I want to do as my focus, I might start with a very strong aerobic base. So it might be like 20 or 30 minutes steady. And then I'm like slowly move that to 30 on, 30 off. And then I'm like slowly shrinking that down. And then I'm increasing the rest to start to build the capacity to really put down some effort. Right. And then like, so the progression is going to be dependent on what I'm looking to achieve, what I'm looking to do. But if it's just a general, like I'm just looking for general fitness, then I mean, there is no real, this is why broad and inclusive, and you want a broad program with lots of touches of different things over the course of time, a broad program, and then layered within the program, you would have progressions on specific, whatever the thing is that somebody wants to do. So, and that's like within the level method, we've got each of the categories. So you have a broad program layered on top. And then if I want to get better at running, for the general population, really all I'm going to do is have them run a little bit more, right? I'm just going to have them run a little bit more, just getting the familiarity and getting my technique together. Just doing that alone will make someone run better. But as I progress further and further up that to like elite levels, more and more specific progressions are required. So if you look at like sprinters are the perfect example. Like if you look at like Charlie Francis, all of his stuff where he like is developing, and look at the kind of training that is happening up to a peak for a 100-meter sprinter. This is, if you look at all the different kinds of sports and stuff, you have like, if you look at the purest sports and how the best in the world prepare for the purest sports, it's going to tell you a lot. Like you're going to learn a lot on how, what are they doing? How are they doing it? Why are they doing it? And if you understand energy systems, you'll be able to decipher exactly what's going on. It won't be like a random training program. You're like, why are they doing that? That doesn't make any sense. That's weird. If you can figure out what the sensation is, or like what is happening, what's the outcome, what's the intent of that training, that's going to be linked to an energy system. And so you can then see like, wow, they're like getting much more tight, and they're doing super high effort, short bursts of stuff. Okay. Because that's the kind of effort that they need. They're dialing that in. So that need to do very, very specific stuff only comes when someone specializes. So when they're specializing for a sport, or they're specializing within a system, within an energy system. So like powerlifting, you're specialist in the electricity world. If you're a marathon runner, you're a specialist within the aerobic world. It doesn't mean that you don't do any of the other stuff. Like you might have doses of these other things, but you're a specialist in this world. And the way you progress that thing is going to be unique to what you're preparing for. So like if you look at West Side stuff in the powerlifting world, or you look at any high level powerlifter, weightlifter, what do they do? What does their program look like leading up to Worlds or leading up to the Olympics or whatever? If you can get a hold of their program, you will see a pure version of a progression to that peak. And that will give you a whole bunch of information, and you'll be able to decipher like what's going on with the energy systems and how is this working. But if you're, again, general population is a completely different demographic. Sure, I can do a progression for someone to help them get better at whatever thing within the world of fitness, but for the most part, just getting more reps of a certain thing is going to create adaptation, especially for beginners. And this is why, like, when we're doing our progressions within our program, I mean, we're not too worried about like move up a little bit every time we're trying to eke out every possible thing. It's just like do it more and you're going to get better. But then after a while, you're going to slow down. You're not going to get any better anymore because you like the neurological adaptation of getting familiar with the movement and stuff is kind of reaching its peak, unless you're doing swimming. And swimming is extremely reliant. Like you've got to be hyper efficient, and cycling. But even with cycling, it's very pure. Cycling is another one of those pure sports because it's so limited. Swimming, you have to have a very, very refined technique, and you've got to be tight the whole time because any tiny little bit of efficiency loss and you lose out. So my point is that like it really just depends on what you're trying to do, who you're working with, and if somebody does kind of squeeze out or milk all of the neurological gains from exposure to a movement, that's when you would switch them to just a basic progressive overload for the most part until that starts to milk. And then you might go to more like periodized advanced stuff, West Side-ish kind of mixed things, again, depending on the world. But it's like it's a very complicated question. This is like the whole foundation of sport is like, how do you progress? It's like, well, there's a lot of variables, you know?
Yeah, it's complicated, but I think what you said, like the simplified version of it is like you said, starting with an assessment and then go broad, like just broad, touch on it all, and then it's another assessment to understand where the weaknesses and where the limiters are, and identify those via the comparable energy systems or the identified energy systems, and then work on that more specifically. During which point, like you're basically building a pyramid of specialization. And to get all the way to the top of the pyramid, to get to the sharpest point, like you're going to have to identify and work on and remove all the limiters. And it's just going to depend on the identification of each of those things.
Like if you give someone a broad program, everybody has what they're naturally good at. Everybody, like even if you think in your head, oh, I suck at everything. Okay, in all the things that you suck at, there will be something that you suck at less. Like that's always the way it goes. So it's like there's always something that will naturally start to raise up, and now with that knowledge, what do you do with that knowledge? Do you focus on the thing that you're best at and then become a specialist in that thing? Or do you become a generalist by never focusing on the strength and building up all the other stuff to get? And that's what CrossFit is essentially. You're trying to build all of it up and not be a specialist in anything. So it's a generalist mode. So if you do a broad program, the best CrossFitters generally are going to be pretty damn good at everything because they've brought it all up. Now, there are plenty of examples of people that, they specialized in something for years and years and years, but in their training, you'll notice that they don't really do that thing very much.
Sure.
They might, they keep it sharp. They don't like not ever do it, but it's like not part of their program. They're like doing other stuff like 90% of the time because they're trying to bring that up. So again, philosophically, it's what do you want to do with that information? And when we look at fitness is about long-term health. People come to the gym, they want to be functional long-term, and so the idea is that you just kind of want to bring everything up together and not have any big holes, not have any big weaknesses. Like in our system, we have double unders. That's a neurological test. I mean, yeah, sure, it's double unders, but there's a lot of coordination there and wrist movement and all, coordination and everything. So we have that there because that's a whole. And the way that we assess that thing in the context of fitness is through that medium.
Right.
but you can test it however you want. Like, it doesn't matter. But the fundamental energy system idea doesn't change. That's like how you want to have electricity stuff covered. You want to have plumbing stuff covered. You want to have aerobic stuff generally covered. How you express and you test those things and you put them into your program is going to vary, in every which possible way. You can choose anything. We could do it with jumping jacks. Like, okay, I can do 20 jumping jacks as fast as you can. Okay, that's different than 10 minutes of steady jumping jacks, right? Like, that's just an example of how, like, the movement, we can just adjust things and morph things based on what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to assess.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome, man. I could do this for hours and hours.
Yeah.
I think we'll shut this down, but I think the takeaway is like just learning more, I think coaches, again, I love analogies like you, but as if you were a chef, like you learn everything about every single ingredient so that you can prepare the best dishes possible. And the more you know about it, the more you'll be able to understand what's wrong, what to fix, and to be able to provide the best for the people. Do you got anything to add to that or
Absolutely. I
contradict
mean,
what I
that's
said? Yeah.
it's the craftsmanship, the tool and the ingredient that you use. I mean, there's an infinite number of ways to express it, but there's going to be a fundamental set of rules. And that set of rules, or a fundamental language, the language is energy systems. When you're looking at athletics or
Yep.
sport or anything, if you understand that underlying hidden language behind everything we do, and you master that, you then create that framework, like a model, to be able to attach onto anything you ever learn about fitness or any sport or any focused thing that you do. Once you have a good framework in your head, it now all starts to make sense. It's like, I can see what's happening here. It's not just like, here's a new world and I don't understand how are they getting these results. It's like, well,
Yep.
it's systems, right? So that's the only thing I would say, is that, like, with ingredients, with tools, there's an underlying set of ideas that will help you accelerate and learn and apply what you're learning better and faster.
Love it. So people can find more at levelmethod.com. Is the energy system course available to the public or just Level Method?
We're probably going to make it available. Right now it's all internal. But yeah, you can always email me, Nathan at Level Method, and I could probably add you and get you access if you wanted to. Like, I had no problem doing that. I mean, it's just so helpful, as a coach. I'm always like, man, if I had known this stuff years and years ago, it's just an accelerator. So you can always email me, but levelmethod.com is where we have everything about the business.
Totally. Love it. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, man.
Don't forget, you guys can join our group at strengthcoachcollective.com.